Saddle hunters, if you are thinking of replacing some old gear, maybe getting some new gear, or if you just haven't gotten into saddle hunting yet and still are considering it, now is a great time to head over to our friends at tetherednation.com and take advantage of all the gear they have on Deal Alert. I'm sure you can find anything that you need. Probably the best resource as far as like your one-stop shop to get all of your saddle needs taken care of. I, of course, run their Phantom saddle this year, ran the Manus saddle last year, used the Predator platform. I use a bunch of their daisy chain equipment. Basically, everything I use from a saddle perspective is from Tethered. And the reason being is that it's light, it's dependable, and number one, and the first and foremost, is I can trust it with my life. So be sure to head over to tetherednation.com and check out all their gear. Also, this entire fall, they put out a ton of hunts on their YouTube channel. If you're interested in checking out the 3 episodes from my Missouri hunt, you can head over to the Tethered YouTube channel and check those out. This podcast is brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. Skull Brew Coffee roasts premium single origin coffee guaranteed to deliver the freshest coffee directly to your doorstep. The kicker, they're 2% for conservation certified and donate 10% of their proceeds back to organizations who support the interests of our hunting community. So go to skullbrewcoffee.com and pick up one of their 3-killer roasts and fuel your hunt and fill more tags with Skull Brew Coffee. Welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Skull Brew Coffee Company. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you are listening to episode number 208. Today, Johnny Utah is back on the show, and we're talking Kansas, Iowa, and late season plans. So stay tuned. All right. What is up, everyone? Happy Wednesday to you. Hope you are doing well. Hope you are feeling fine. Hope you got all your Christmas shopping done. I wrapped up most of mine last night. I'm usually a very last-minute shopper, so the fact that I'm done, this is probably coming out around Christmas, to be honest with you. I'm actually way confused. This is not Christmas week, so I am like 2 weeks ahead. So I am actually ahead of the game. I'm usually a Christmas shopper like the week of, sometimes historically the day of or the evening of. So the fact that I'm done 2-ish weeks in advance is pretty much a red letter month for this guy. Because usually Saint Nick doesn't get anything done around here till about 24 hours before the big dance. I like the pressure. I like to be in that pressure cooker to have to get it done at the last minute. You know, I'm expecting a Jelly of the Month Club to show up on my. No, I'm just kidding. I haven't even watched the Chevy Chase movie yet this season. We're big Elf people here in this house. We watch a lot of Elf. But anyway, we're gonna turn the page here. I don't know what all that was. We're gonna go ahead and get into some deer hunting here, but no, I hope you guys have had success this season. You know, we're pushing forward here. Obviously, the gun season in Pennsylvania just wrapped up. I've not talked about this much because I've been just trying to work through it and hoping that it would get better. I've not actually been able to get out a whole lot the past couple weeks. Basically, since I got back from Missouri, I've been able to get out once. Reason being is I had a little bit of a shoulder injury right before we left for Missouri. And of course, didn't have time to address it because we were leaving, traveling, whatever. Got progressively worse, and when I got back, you know, I tried to hunt, you know, one day, you know, and that was the day I think I'd mentioned where I had that shooter come in behind me, and I blew the opportunity, and was spending some time shooting my bow, and it was just to the point to where I couldn't really even pull my bow back effectively. Like I could get it back, but the pain was pretty bad. So, you know, I'm going through a lot of, you know, physical therapy and stuff like that, trying to get my shoulder right. So I've not been able to get out at all. And don't know if I'm going to be able to get out at all for the remainder of the season. Just kind of the shoulder is going to kind of dictate what I can and can't do. And the bummer was yesterday I had some, you know, it was Saturday morning. I had a PT session in the morning, and I was going to go out and hunt, but it was the only time that the doctor could get me in. So I took it, you know, trying to address the issues. And wouldn't you know, the place I would have been have a cell camera nearby, and a shooter shows up at like 9:30, and that's pretty much been my season. It's been a series of near misses. You know, Wilson and I talked a little bit about that. You know, getting kicked in the ding ding, and so the hits just kind of keep coming. So, we'll hope that I'm able to get out here. I'm hoping that things start to feel better in like the next week or two, and I'm able to start to shoot my bow again, and let that kind of be the judge as far as whether or not I'm gonna get out and do any hunting. Because truthfully, it's like I've not been able to pick my bow up, and I'm just not a big fan of going out cold. So if I can't shoot my bow, at least for a week or so, 2 weeks or whatever, and kind of get dialed back in and feel good. Maybe I shoot it and in 2 days I feel great. If that's the case, awesome. But I'm not gonna rush it because I have some cool hunts that I want to do next year, and I don't want to jeopardize having to screwing anything up any worse than it already is. So with that, not a lot of whitetail updating to do on this end. So I think we're just going to get jumped into the show. I have my buddy, you know him, you love him, Mr. Johnny Utah Mulligan, back on the show today. He's had if you followed along with John at all, or if you've listened to the previous podcast, like he had a ripping year last year where it was like the dude just could not do wrong. Killed a monster bear, did a turkey slam with a bow and on predominantly a lot of it was on public. And killed a nice speed goat again this year. And so he had a really good run of just filling tags left and right. And this year, Lady Luck hasn't shined on him quite as much. And so this session, we're just kind of talking about what happened throughout the year. John, was in Kansas. He, of course, was hunting Iowa. He had some funky stuff happen while he was there. Similar to me, maybe some deer showing up on camera when he was in Iowa, when he was out of state. And he's had a specific deer that he's been chasing, and I'm familiar with this deer because he was chasing him last year when I was in Iowa with him. He has his sheds. He's got a lot of history with this deer. And so, this was the year that he was kind of putting on the full press. It feels like he learned enough about this deer, and he's, for the most of the year was playing cat and mouse with this deer. So without further ado, we're just going to kind of go ahead and get jumped in. I'll let John kind of explain what his year has looked like to this point. So with that, I want to thank you all for listening. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. Back by popular demand. It's my brother from another mother, hailing from the Midwest. You know him, you love him. The dulcet tones of the Iowa Strangler. Johnny Utah Mulligan. What's going on, dude?
That's the best one yet right there, brother.
I know. Well, it's like I had to do that on the fly, too, because I remembered it as I started doing the lead-in. I was like, man, the last time we talked about how every time we do this, like I have a whole new setup for him. And I sometimes game plan them, but I didn't game plan this one. That one was just like, I feel like I'm kind of like, I don't know, like an Ace freestyle rapper or something like that. That was straight, as the kids say, that was straight from the dome.
Right. I like it.
Good. People tuning in are like, I did not know I was going to get freestyle rap on this podcast.
Right.
Right. There you go. We can maybe start a whole new subgenre of like whitetail rap. You know what I mean?
There you go. I like it.
We could probably, get some affiliation going on with like some, off the wall, companies or something like that are into like nothing but like gangster whitetail rap. Cause that's what I'm all about. That's what I'm here for.
Well, yeah.
Gangster whitetail rap. I'm trying to imagine what that person would look like. Instead of like having big gold chains, they'd have like rattling antlers, like big rattling antlers around their neck and shit. Kind of like Flava Flav of the whitetail world.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Are you picking that up? You picking up what I'm putting down?
Oh, I like it. Yeah. It's good. It's
good. Right now, like half the people that tuned in just totally turned this shit off.
They're like, yep, I'm out.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm out of here. But anyway, so we have John on. John, of course, is my dude, my man, my brother from another mother. We haven't had a chance to catch up in a while. Truthfully, it's like, man, I want to say we've maybe only talked like 2-3 times like on the phone since like, since we both got cranking with like the rut and stuff like that, just because schedules get crazy, hunts get crazy and stuff like that. And so we've done a little catching up here and there for bits and pieces, but we haven't had like a hardcore sit down. So it just felt like it was time to sit down and just kind of like hash it all out.
Yeah, for sure. It's always good to get caught up, plus, I mean, like when you're in the season, you're in the moment, you know what I mean? It's tough, schedules going other ways. And my mind was, completely consumed on, whitetails or whatever. And yeah. So things are winding down.
Yes. Yeah. And we've both had some like wounds to lick and stuff like that. And so it just felt like a good time just to kind of talk through all that. Maybe have maybe like a little therapy session. You know what I mean? Might be, might be more, might
It
be,
might take more than just a talk
uh,
for me to get over my wounds.
right. So with that, man, like we're just going to go ahead and dive right in, dude. I think the last time you and I talked, I think we talked about your Kentucky trip, right? Cause that was very early in the season that you had going on. But then you came back to Iowa, you did some stuff. I think you had some shoots and stuff like that in the middle as well. But then I know you went to Kansas and, I think with the folks from Headhangers, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah. I went and hunted over there with some buddies of mine, Luke and Nate, that own Head Hangers. In and for anybody listening, Head Hangers is not an outfitter. Head Hangers, they make it's just a cool, simple bracket for hanging European mounts. It's
Yeah.
very inexpensive. They make them in different colors. They also make turkey fan mounts as well, and then they've got table mounts that, you can mount European skulls, like on a tabletop or a desk or something like that. But
I like how you designated that they're European skull mounts because you don't want to get anyone confused of using human ones.
yes,
Right.
right. We're not doing human cadavers boiling or anything, but so and I'm, I've got some European mounts. I've got my bear mount, and I've got a couple of whitetails, some deadheads even, and stuff like that. That were cool that I picked up. And so, anyways, they're good buddies of mine, and ironically, all the years that I was, doing the Wicked tree gear booths at the Iowa Deer Classic, they were diagonal across the aisle from me every single year. And every year I'd always pick up one or two from them. And then the next year, one or two and one or two. And I was paying full retail like anybody else, and
Right.
we just became friends over the years. And Nate was like, dude, won't you put in for a Kansas tag? And if and when you ever draw one, you can come hunt some of our ground that we've got leased up or permission hunts, permission land and whatnot. So I put in this year back in March and I got drawn. So yeah, I didn't know when was going to be the right time to go. Looking at their weather, things were getting cold and nasty. And I thought, man, I'm going to try to go here this last week of October of Iowa. Now, I, for one, love the last week of October in Iowa if we have a good cold front.
Right.
What I did not know was going to happen this year is we were going to have 5 consecutive days of a cold front in Iowa. And the whole time I was in Kansas, I'm watching slammers getting shot all over Southeast Iowa.
Well,
I mean, pigs.
Yeah. And not only that, you had in Iowa, and we'll get to your Iowa stuff here in a second, not to let the cat out of the bag, but there's been a specific buck. And we even talked about him, I think, in the last time that you and I chatted, because he had showed back up, right? Because he hadn't kind of Tyson is what you call him. He hadn't showed back up, and we were a little concerned. Like, did he make it? Did he not make it? Like, you have his sheds, but like, why is he not showing up? Like, this is the time frame he should be here. And then he presented, right? And it was like, okay, cool, he's going to be around. And then you went to Kansas, which we were talking about it. You're like, I live in Iowa, the last week of October, and I'm leaving. And then sure enough, like what happened on your trail cameras while you were in Kansas?
Yeah. So I'm in Kansas, and I get up early Sunday morning, super friggin' early, and I drive all the way out to Kansas. It took me about 7.5 hours to get there. I get out there. I have just enough time to like, hey, what's up, guys? How are you? Yeah, it was a long drive. Let's get into a tree stand. So immediately get into a tree stand. It's super windy, and I start cracking antlers together, getting real aggressive right off the bat. And the buck that I came out there to try to kill comes running into 41 yards behind me. And I'm like, oh, there he is.
Right.
And I'm like, man, light's fading, but he stands there for like, I thought it was like 5 minutes, but realistically it was probably like a minute and a half or something. But you know how it is when you're in the woods.
Right.
He's standing there broadside for me at 41 yards. I was in like a bunch of like a hedgerow thicket.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all, this was October 25th, so all the leaves are still on, and with a 22-mile-an-hour crosswind, the leaves are just chattering. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I couldn't even hear my camera guy. I'm just kind of reading his lips at this point, and I'm just like, get on him. I'm about to shoot him. And so he gets on him. I draw back, and I'm thinking, man, 41 yards, like that's kind of one of those magic number areas that a deer could possibly duck.
Right.
And then I think better of it, and I'm like, man, if I hold low, I'm going to end up shooting underneath him or hit him low. As windy as it is, there's no way he's going to hear this bow go off. And watching it on in real time, I thought I smoked him.
Right.
We watch it on video, and I realized that it looked like in the last 5 yards of arrow flight, the buck completely dropped all the way to his chest, and I shot right over top of him. Clean miss. And I'm sick,
Oh,
but
he was a slammer buck too, dude.
we estimated him to be about 145 or maybe 150-inch 8-pointer, but he had like 9-10-inch brow tines.
Yeah, but just dude, that's from an 8-point, man. That's just like that's huge.
Oh, insane. And then in like seeing him in person, if you were to put a board on his shoulders and his rump, he probably had a 6 to 7-inch sag in his back.
Yeah.
On the hoof, he is hands down the biggest bodied buck that I've ever had an opportunity at in my life. And I actually think he's 150, 155 as an 8-pointer.
Damn,
he
dude.
was huge.
And that's the crazy thing. When we were talking right after that, like we had a quick phone call, and you were saying like one of your buddies shot one out there, and you were explaining to me just how big they are, right? And like the biggest deer I've ever seen on the hoof was when I was out in Iowa with you last year, right? Like that was like the biggest. When I saw a deer, regardless of the size, it was just like the bodies of them were just big. And you can find some decent sized bodied deer in PA. You can find some good bucks in Ohio, like big bodied deer or whatever. But there was just something different about the ones I was seeing in Iowa. Like just like the size, even like the does were big. You know what I mean? But
yeah.
what you were telling me though, the size of those Kansas deer, because you were like, I was like, are they the same size as the Iowa deer? Or what's the deal with the discrepancy in size? You're like, dude, it's not even close. You're like, it's like Angus.
Yeah, they're big. They really are big out there. And we've got giant bucks in Iowa. But and we'll get into Tyson later, but I swear it's like I've seen two different genetic types in Southeast Iowa. It's like you have the central Iowa giant bodies, and then you have like the Missouri. Because I mean, those deer can cross the Des Moines River. Sometimes it's only 2 foot deep in places. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's almost like there's two different genetic types or something. Sometimes they can be long and sleek, and then other times they're just like heifers. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
anyway, this fella ducks the arrow.
He ducks the arrow, clean miss, and I'm like, man, maybe we can get back on him again. And I wake up the next morning, and Tyson, my buck in Iowa, walks right under my stand 5 yards. And he does it like 3 times that day, all between 7 and 9 a.m. Yeah. Which, when I look at the wind, that is the stand that I would have gone to. That's the stand that I would have chose. And I'm just like, oh my God. You know what I mean? I'm like,
dude,
I'm sick. And I'm like, well, I'm here in Kansas. I can't think about Iowa right now. I got to try to bang this out. Well, around the 26th, Kansas is a bait state. Okay. But they're not coming to feed. It is full on pre-rut chasing, antler rattling. They're running around like crazy. There is no pattern. And I went the next 4 days hunting out there, and saw one possible shooter at 100 yards, and the rest were just little scrubs running around,
Hmm.
or no deer whatsoever.
Wow, that's crazy.
It was so hit and miss. But
Yeah.
my buddy Nate, he shot a slammer. He shot a 60 class buck while we were out there. So that was cool. And another buddy of mine, Les Welch, he's a fellow Sitka ambassador. He was out there hunting as well. We're all mutual friends and stuff. So
Nice.
He didn't have anything. So while I was out there, I got news from my mom that my dad was really, really sick
Right.
and was going in for some tests. We didn't really know exactly what it was, but it possibly was looking like maybe it was cancer and whatnot. And I'm like, man, it's time to get out of here. I need to at least make it back to Iowa. That puts me a little closer to Kentucky if I need to run home and that kind of stuff.
Right.
And like I said, everything was so erratic. Les stayed, and I'm not talking shit on Les. Les shot at a buck and had a buck duck his arrow.
Damn.
And I'm like, oh my God, like I dropped off the bad voodoo while I was out there,
Right. What
So I
was
was like,
what was the habitat like there? Because I mean, my plan is to go to Kansas next year. Right. That's kind of like in the cards for me. At least as long as everything works out and my health is right or whatever. You know what I mean? Like not anything unforeseen comes up. I'm headed to Kansas is the plan.
yeah,
What was the habitat like where you were hunting? Because I mean, Kansas has a lot of different. Depending on where you're at in the state, you can be in all
yeah,
kinds of different stuff.
yeah. So I was kind of in like oil field country.
Okay.
Um, like Lyons, Salina, Kansas, in that
Right.
area. And there was timber, not a lot of trees to get into. I mean,
Right.
not what you and I consider typical tree stand sets where you're going to get 20, 25 foot up in a tree.
Right.
These were like hedge apples. And you, if you don't die climbing 10 feet and trying to get into a stand, like screw in steps are very popular because you can't even find a tree that's straight enough over the course of 30 inches that your traditional climbing sticks, the V brackets, would actually have a flat spot to meet on.
Right.
I mean, it was funky. And I am not a fan of screw ins at
Yeah.
all. I've seen them move. I've seen them break. I've seen people fall, slip off of them, get real fucked up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because those things, if they break, man, it's like they just turn into a knife.
Oh yeah,
you know.
exactly. Yeah, they just shear and yeah, awful. So anyways, um,
So that
I
so that was kind of Kansas in a nutshell, right? Like you were like
yeah, that was it.
you had a
Uh,
great opportunity, had a good buck, and it just didn't
yeah,
pan out.
yeah, yep. And and that's the thing. Like we've all been in that situation, bow hunting, whether you're shooting a buck or a doe, and the deer jumps the string, ducks the arrow, whatever you want to call it. Um, I have done a lot more talking to some very intelligent people when it comes to audio and decibel levels and decibel readings and that kind of stuff. I always thought that it was the deer was reacting to either a loud broadhead or the veins of an arrow or whatever.
Right.
Um, that's not what it is. It is the bow.
Hmm.
It is either, well, I take that back. It is either the bow or they just simply catch movement of the arrow.
Right.
Um, it's not so much the noise of the arrow
Of the
or
arrow flight itself.
correct. Yep. So, um,
That's crazy, man.
because if they were to hear the arrow, it's too late.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I've stood, not behind a target or anything like that, but have put a camera right on a target or something like that and took a shot to film an arrow, right?
Yep.
And if you crank the audio up, you can, now our hearing is not as good as a deer, obviously, but you can hear it, you can begin to hear it, and by the time you hear it, it's on it. It's on the target.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So, you can kind of hear that little before it makes impact, but it's like a millisecond before it makes impact. Now
Yeah.
they would hear it a little in advance of that, but like you said, it's like by the time they hear that, it's already too late. But that's like just goes to show like the like I guess the importance of having a bow that's going to be quiet as possible on release, and doing everything you can do to dampen and shoot heavier arrows so it absorbs more of the sound or more of the vibration of the bow or whatever the case is.
Yep. Exactly. So that was Kansas, and I can accept that. You know what I mean? I mean, it sucks. I don't like it, but like I can accept it. It is
Right.
what it is, and life goes on, right?
Yep.
So I do have some plans of going back out to Kansas this year if everything works out. I'm going to try to go back, either before Christmas or after Christmas or something like that.
Right. Nice.
It is a $600 tag, so
Right.
I want to try. I do want to try to fill it, if I can.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I come back to Iowa, and I'll be honest, a lot of the family stuff is weighing on me pretty hard, and
Yeah.
and my mom's like, "Hey, just plan on coming in around Thanksgiving, and just do your thing out there in Iowa, and keep hunting, try to get your buck down." So I get right back into my property, and I'm on Tyson. And I've said this before. If any of the listeners remember me talking about my property that I hunt here, it's just barely over 100 acres. It's
Mhm.
easy to burn it out
Yep.
because 60 acres is pasture.
Yeah.
So I've only got about 45 acres of timber. And so if I'm not careful, I can smoke it out and I'm screwed, right?
Right.
So I'm having to really play cat and mouse. Some days I'm hunting because I just really want to hunt, but I'm really not in the best spot. I'm like, I'm probably not going to see Tyson, but I'm also not blowing my property out either.
Right.
And of course, there's always that puncher's chance, that you could
Right.
see something else. But
Well, how many times is that deer? You know what I mean? Like you have enough history with that deer, and you've seen him multiple times. You saw him multiple
yeah,
times last year. You have him on camera, like on like that. You've actually filmed him, right? And
yep,
you
yep,
have plenty of like, trail camera pictures of him and stuff like that. It's like, and like how many times during the course of the past like year or so, right? Has he, zagged when you thought he was going to zig, right? Where you're like, oh, he's totally should be showing up here, like based on this one, and then all of a sudden you're like, man, he just popped out of somewhere I've never ever seen him. You
yeah.
know what
And
I mean?
he's always, and that's the way he's always been. He's always been so erratic. Even last year, the times that I saw him and passed him, my buddy goes, "Well, do you think he winded you?" I'm like, he stood at 85 yards downwind of me or 85 yards in a different location. So if he winded me, he would have been like gone. You know what I mean?
Right.
But yeah, I mean,
What do you think? And we're gonna play psychologist here of a deer, which is probably the dumbest thing we could possibly do. But but what do you think? Like what? Because you have the history you have with this deer, right? Like and I'm sure you've thought about this because I think about it even whenever I don't have nearly as much history with a deer. Trying to think about like what the hell makes him so erratic? Like why?
hmm
Because the thing is on your property, it'd be one thing if like the food sources were shifting or whatever, right? Like
yeah,
like those things make sense, right? Or a doe pulled him or he's on a doe and he's in like a different area because he was on a doe, following a doe or whatever, right?
yeah,
But it's like a lot of the times when you've seen him be erratic, it's like it's hard to like I can't figure out like I haven't been able to figure out what it is. I'm just curious if you've like sat and thought about like what the hell is making him do like this weird shit that I can never figure out what it is he's gonna do,
yeah,
other than just being a deer.
yeah. I think it's just being a deer. Because and the only consistency that I have ever noticed about this deer in particular is he has always entered fields um, with the wind in his back.
Hmm.
Now, is he already scent checking by circling that field it through the timber before he entered it already? And that's why he came in with the wind in his back? Or is he's so comfortable on that property that he just does whatever he wants to do. And I'm hunting him thinking he's going to be using his senses and his defenses, right?
Right.
So maybe that's the cat and mouse. Maybe and I've thought about that. Like maybe I'm hunting him like he's scared to death,
And he's
and he's
not.
like every other deer. And
Right.
actually, he's just like, man, I am safe here. Nothing can hurt me here. Like I said, every time he's ever come in, he's had the wind in his back. So
Now, has there been does there when he's come in with the windows back, or has it been both, like does and no does?
both,
Both.
yeah,
Okay.
does and no does. So on the third encounter that I had with him this year was finally in a shootable, killable opportunity. I was in my grizzly box blind, and he was just following a doe, and I want to say this was like November. Oh, what was this? Like November 6th, maybe
Mm-hmm.
7th, 6th or 7th, something like that. Um, he he was just following the doe. Wherever she went is where he went. And he he followed her. She came in front of me at like 20 yards, and he was hanging out like at 40. And I'm like, there's no need to draw back on him now because the doe, she had me pegged.
Right.
There was something about the box blind that she didn't like. She never has. She's the one doe
Oh
on my
yeah.
property that has never, the doe I'm talking
I
about.
know exactly which doe you're talking about. We saw
Yep.
we did one hunt together last year
Yep.
when I was out with you. And that doe popped out, and it's like no lie, she hit a certain part in that food plot, and she just stopped and stared and started stomping. There's
Yep.
no way on God's green earth she could see us. There's
Nope.
no way on God's green earth she could smell us. She
Yep.
just did not like the box, and it's not like the box blind just showed up.
Yeah.
Like
It's
it
been
had,
there all year.
yeah.
Been there for 2 years now. And so same doe. And I'm like, oh, as much as I'd like to shoot her, like he's following her right now. So I can't shoot her. I'm like, I just need her to keep on moving through the field and drag him on in front of me. Now, if you're familiar with, the windows of blinds, I need her to pass through my window so she can't see me draw inside the blind.
Right.
And so I can draw to shoot him. And so I've got him at 29 yards, and as I range him, D loop, as soon as I go to draw, she just either heard something, sensed something, whatever, she blows out. And of course, so then he turns a 180, like, what's going on? Why are we running? Okay, well, if you're running, I'm running.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that might have been my one opportunity
Yeah.
this year. So fast forward, I was November 12th. I went into a tree stand that is only 40 yards from the blind, but it's on the opposite side. And he walks out completely by himself. There's no does in the field. He's got the wind in his back, and it's in my face. He walks out, and he's walking completely broadside, perpendicular to me, and I'm like, finally, this is my opportunity. I've got to capitalize. I know what trail he's walking on through my clover, and I can range ahead of him.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's walking a straight line theoretically. So I'm like, okay, I range it 37 yards. I dial my single pin, to 37 yards. I wait, I wait, I wait. I draw, get anchored in. Meh. I stop him. And when I stop him, he goes on full alert and looks straight up the tree. And he's looking right at me, pegged. It doesn't matter. As soon as he looks at me, I'm releasing the arrow already. But he's at 37 yards, and everything tells me at that distance, I'm not shooting a 400 feet per second crossbow,
Right.
nor at 28 and a half inches of draw length, I'm not shooting a bow that's shooting 350 feet per second because I shoot a real heavy arrow.
Right.
Um, I'm probably like 280 on my
Mm-hmm.
bow. And so I'm like, I better hold a little low because I'm thinking Kansas,
I was
what I
just gonna
mean?
say, dude, it's like when you have these experiences like in other places, right? Like you start to think about those things. You know what I
Yep.
mean? You start to think about, okay, I had a deer, it was like 40 yards difference, right? And like it dropped like it dropped to China. You
Yep.
know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like, so
Yep. And I put it right on his armpit, like right below the armpit,
mhm,
actually. You know, I was like 2 inches above the brisket line, and I'm thinking if he drops a little bit, it's heart. If he drops a whole lot, it's still double lung.
right.
And he doesn't even flinch. And I actually hit him right where, if you follow the front leg up, right where the front leg meets the other bone and it starts to make that 45-degree angle, you
Yep.
know what I mean,
Yep.
towards the neck. I hit him right at that socket. And I'm like, oh no, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
instantly he turns, spins, bolts out. He gets about 10 yards away from where the arrow hit him, and I hear the leg bone break.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my God. Like, if I actually thought it would have done something, I was fully prepared to unhook my tether and just take a header out of the tree. Uh, but I'm in like a multi-stemmed oak,
Yeah.
multi-trunked oak. So I'm just gonna like plinko all the way down to the bottom. You know what I mean? And
Right.
I'm gonna have like some bruises and a couple of strawberries, and that's about it. So,
Right. Right.
and then be more pissed at myself, like I can't even kill myself.
Right.
Uh, so I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Well, I mean, he blows out of there. So I wait about 15 minutes. I get down ever so quietly. I go straight to where my arrow is because I can see the knock, laying
Right.
there. And I have full blood all the way through my arrow.
Did it pass through? I don't remember.
Well, yeah, I
Okay.
mean, it passed through. So I'm like, and it's not meaty blood. Like there's no hair on the arrow. It didn't get wiped clean from muscle. And so I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do. And my theory has always been if you don't see them fall in the field or see them crash, then if he's dead now, he's more dead later.
Right. Yeah.
So I go completely away from the direction he ran, and I go back to my truck and gather my thoughts. I wait about an hour, and then I go back to the food plot, and I'm thinking, all right, I am just going to walk with my red lamp only, and I'm just going to see if I have any blood leaving the arrow. And it's pouring blood.
Right.
I mean, pouring like heart blood. And I'm thinking, you know what? It might have actually hit that leg bone and then just turned up or even horizontal and came across right at the bottom of his heart.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I did have a 2-inch mechanical, and I'm not a mechanical broadhead shooter, but that day in particular, I wanted to try out a new brand of broadhead,
Mm-hmm.
and so I thought, you know what, there is a chance with that kind of broadhead, I might have snaked the bottom of that heart, and for the first 60 yards, I'm not even looking at blood, I'm looking for white belly.
Right.
I'm thinking I completely heart shot him, and it's blood pouring everywhere. And then all of a sudden it went to just drops,
Hmm.
and it continued for drops for 1,200 yards.
Jeez.
And then I'm starting to think, okay, well, it's not a heart shot. And if it is in that leg shoulder, um, I might have caught an artery or some good veins. So the best thing I can do is to keep pushing him and keep him bleeding.
Right.
If in theory, if I was still bumping him.
Right. Did you find Did you find any beds as you were like anywhere where you laid down or anything like that on your way?
12 beds over the course of 1,200 yards.
Yeah.
With big pools of coagulated blood, and finally batteries run dead, and I'm like, that's it, we got to call it tonight on headlamps and stuff. So I go home, I don't sleep, wake up first thing in the morning, we pick up the trail again, we go another 200 yards, and we find 3 beds inside of 10 feet with dried up coagulated thick blood, and then that's it, nothing. So, like any ethical hunter, I'm not. I can't just. I don't just go get my bow and get back in the stand again. I
Right.
end up grid searching for 2 days. I had 4 or 5 buddies with me as well. We grid searched for a couple of days, and after 2 days, we have searched everything legally that we can search.
Mhm.
I had blood that crossed over to one property, which does allow me to cross property lines in Iowa. But like I said, we grid searched everything legally we could. I knocked on a door. I got permission to grid search one additional property, and he was not there. And so I'm thinking, I don't know. I don't know at this point if he's alive, dead, coyotes. I know that he's only on 3 legs. So fast forward 2 weeks, all of a sudden I get a trail camera picture of him, and he's limping on a trail camera, on an Exodus cam. And so I'm like, oh my God, he's still alive. That's amazing. Um, Even though I really wanted to kill him, I'm more happy that he is alive and not dead somewhere that I can't find him, or coyotes got him or something like that,
Right. Right. Yeah.
So now we're like, all right, where is he going to resurface? And I make a play into some recently cut corn. And I'm like, you know what? If I'm him and he's lost a ton of weight, I'm going to that cut corn. That's where I'm going to go. So 2 nights ago, I went into the cut corn, and there he comes walking out. And
And I text you because I think you sent me a picture of that,
yep.
and I text you back. I'm just like, dude, he is taunting you. Like,
Oh yeah. 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 It was ridiculous. And he came out at 89 yards through the trees. There's no way I could have made a bow shot, through those branches and stuff, but
right.
he came out at 89 yards, and I watched him for, I don't know, 45 minutes until it got dark. And by the time it got dark, he was about 140 yards. He just slowly but surely fed away from me. And do believe me, like, it was a 2 mile an hour wind day. Had I had more wind, the wind was in my favor. I was prepared to climb down and walk through the timber
Right.
and try to sneak up on him, stalk up on him. And just, if I could get within 40, 50 yards and let one fly.
Yeah.
But 2 mile an hour wind, dry, crunchy leaves. It was,
Yeah.
I,
He was
I,
good.
yeah, I tried it. I mean, I made it down to the base of my stand, and I walked like 2 steps, and I'm like, it's not possible. Like,
Right.
crouching tiger, hidden dragon couldn't pull this off.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So I was
Exactly.
like, do I have a zip line where I could zip line into the field? Like,
Right.
anybody got a helicopter?
Teleport something.
Yeah, I was just screwed. And I'm like, I'm literally, there's nothing I can do. There's 140 yards open field between us. And so I had to let him go.
Yeah.
And I've been out there the last night and tonight. And last night and tonight, I had 2 little scrub bucks, and I think I had 11 does last night, and then I had 9 does tonight. But what cut corn in Iowa seems like you've got like 3 to 4 good nights after they combine, and then it kind of loses some of the attraction.
Right.
But those first 3-4 nights, it's like every deer in the area is coming to that cut corn, but
Right.
just because they leave so much behind.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how tonight ended. Tomorrow is the last day of early archery season here in Iowa. And then I'm probably going to get yelled at, and people will get pissed for this, but
keyboard warrior time. We're gonna get some nasty grams.
yeah, well, we have a whole bunch of boomers, man, that'll be out there with their shotguns and their bush lights and party hunting and letting her fly.
Yeah.
And that's coming from a guy that wounded a buck. I mean, I get it, it's on me, but
right. Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah, we have the same thing in PA. We're in the midst, as you and I are talking right now. We're in the midst of our gun season, and I mean, look, people want to go gun hunt. Good on you. I just don't enjoy it. It's not something that I'm into, and so I usually sit these 2 weeks out and just kind of let it. I mean, I can hunt with a bow if I would like, but look, I've been shot at during small game season. I ain't trying to get shot at with a
Yeah.
with a deer
Well,
rifle. You know what I
and
mean?
that's my
So,
thing. I have nothing against guns. Obviously, former law enforcement.
right.
I love guns. And I don't have anything against gun hunting. I am very anti party and gun driving.
Right.
Um, One, I think party hunting becomes completely illegal. Um, just because, I mean, it's kind of crazy whenever 107-year-old women supposedly bought a buck tag,
Right.
uh, and they were in the party. Like, I'm sure they were dragging their oxygen tank through the corn,
Right.
pushing draws. But
Right.
um, and then gun driving. I mean, every year I'm on the DNR, email list. It's like every couple of days during gun season, another person died, another person died, another person died. And I'm like, Jesus, people, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's just so dangerous.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's like, this is just me personally. I just don't trust other people enough. You know what I
Sure.
mean? To be in the timber, especially on public land here in Pennsylvania, where it's just like there's a lot of hunters. You know what I mean? We have like per capita, I think the most hunters in the freaking country. You know what I mean? Like I think it's
Yeah.
between us and Michigan, if I'm not mistaken. I think we had maybe 800 and some odd thousand. We used to be right around a million. You know what I mean? It's dropped in recent years. I think it's ticked up just a little bit, maybe this year from if memory serves from what I've heard. But you know, in public land is there's a lot of folks out there enjoying their free access and good for them. But I just don't trust being around people with firearms enough to want to be in that situation. It's the same reason why I'm really apprehensive hunting turkeys on public land, because people just don't take the time to identify what it is that what it is that they're aiming at. You know what I mean? So, like for me, it's like a lot I do hunt some turkeys around here on public, but what I've kind of decided is I think I'm just going to have a turkey camp back at our family farm and now hunt turkeys back there because there's a bunch of birds and I don't have to worry about it. So, but yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to, the gun season, here coming to a close at some point, and looking forward to getting back out for late season and stuff like that. Is that kind of your game plan, is like, take a little break and then kind of get back on it after?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I've got a photo shoot in Oklahoma. Um, I'm not bougie enough for like the Bassmasters, but I've got some Cat Masters
There you go.
photo work to go do, which, dude, I'm telling you, those catfishing people, they are ate up with it.
Really?
And their boats are just as expensive, I assure you. Um, but I got a Cat Masters thing to go do down in Grove, Oklahoma for a few days. And that'll be during our shotgun season here. And I don't know when I'm going to go to Kansas. I would like to go to Kansas during our shotgun season, so I'm not missing any of the late season. But December 20th through, I think it's maybe the January the 8th or 9th or something like that. But we have our late season, which is muzzleloader / archery.
Right.
Now, my first season archery tag, since I didn't tag a buck, it is still valid. So technically, I will still have 2 buck tags for the late season.
Right.
At the end of that, I mean, that game is all food. Period.
Right.
Food, 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 food. Standing beans, cut beans, standing corn, cut corn, or turnips or something like that.
Right.
But that's the name of the game there. I went to all clover this year, so my clover doesn't have a lot of draw now that we've had some frost and it's changed the plant structure and palatability of that. So that's not going to be a good thing for me. But like I said, I do have a cut cornfield. It might still have some attraction in a couple weeks. We'll see.
Yeah, man. I wish I'm not a great late season hunter, and I don't have a lot of food around me on some of these places. So I'm not quite sure what my plan is going to be for late season as of now. The one thing I have considered, though, because I have a buddy, Johnny Stewart, he comes out to Iowa almost every late season because literally, maybe I shouldn't say anything, but non-residents can basically buy a late season Iowa tag almost as like an over the counter. Like you're almost assured to get it.
Yep.
and that's
Yep.
what he does. So he basically comes out and hunts Iowa every year, and for the most part, and always manages to get the tag, and he comes out and usually muzzleloader hunts it, or he brings his bow and a muzzleloader, and he'll decide which he wants to hunt with on a given day or whatever. And
Yep.
so it's one of those things where I don't know how good hunting the public out there would be during late season. I think you maybe have some of the similar struggles. I know there's that, at least on the piece that I hunted with, that you shared with me, there is a big cornfield that's back there. So that might be the one place that's in play potentially,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Otherwise, just trying to find a good old boy that'll let you come on their property for the end of the, for the last like week or two of the season to hunt some fields and stuff like that, and try to find some food weary bucks or whatever would be an option. But it's something I've considered, just to be able to try to come out more often, is to do that late season jam. But we'll see.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I know people have good success late season a lot. It does seem like the people that have the most success are private landowners that are planting food for deer.
Yeah. And he
Uh,
basically has a relationship with a farmer that he's hunted at that person's farm for,
yep.
I don't, it might be 10 years or whatever, but it's been years. He's hunted the same place. And so they let him come out and hunt it whenever he wants. So,
Yep.
so that's, good for him. He has an opportunity to go hunt a piece of private, just, through a relationship. And so that's, it makes sense for him. I'm not sure it would make a whole lot of sense for me if I don't have a specific place that I'm going to go.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've got a buddy of mine that has thrown out the idea that on his farm they always seem to have a lot of late season bucks come through there. And granted, some of them are pretty busted up, and you know what I mean. It's
Right.
kind of slim pickings, but
Right.
but he does have some late season activity, and I might have an opportunity to jump out on his place and go after one out there. But I mean, I am by no means throwing in the towel.
Right.
But I'm also one of those people that I can talk about the status of the season, and I'm also a realist. I'm like, damn, I might be snapping a streak here of at least one buck with my bow per year. I got like a 14-year streak going. I'm
Right.
like, oh damn, man.
Right.
So, I had opportunities. Here's the thing. Mature deer, sometimes one particular buck, you might only get one or two good opportunities at that deer all year, and I've had 5.
Right.
So I'm happy and on the same 100-acre piece.
Right. Yeah.
So in that regard, I'm happy with myself on that. Give myself a little golfer's clap. But on the execution, I fucked up royally.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'm beating myself up over that.
No, I hear you, man. Like it's, I wasn't hunting a specific, well, I kind of was, but I was kind of hunting a group of deer on a couple of different pieces here in PA. In one in particular that I was trying to kill. And, it was like what you were talking about earlier, whenever you were in Kansas and Tyson shows up when you're in Kansas, right? It's a similar situation here for me, where it's like, I couldn't hunt Sundays because those two, we had a couple Sundays we could hunt, but these two in particular, you couldn't hunt. And I hunted Saturday, had the right wind, had the same wind the next day on Sunday. Deer didn't show on Saturday. Deer showed at 2:00 in the afternoon on Sunday. I would have been in the tree, to kill him. Following weekend, same thing, had the right wind, hunted that spot on Saturday, couldn't hunt it on Sunday. Deer showed up at 9 a.m. Would have been in that spot to kill that deer that day. You know what I mean? So it's, I was just missing him. I wasn't, when I could hunt, wasn't timing up with his route when he was looping through to hit that scrape, and I was being done dirty by just the fact that I couldn't hunt that particular day. And then Missouri, similar to you, it was almost like, dude, I don't know, it was like 3 days later or something like that, or 2 days later when you hit Tyson, I ended up hitting one in Missouri, looked all over the place for it, couldn't recover it. And I've told that story, went and got permission on the private that was surrounding it and searched it, and had some buddies come in to help to search it. Zach's, cousin Chad helped, Zach helped, we went all over the place looking for that thing. And, high shoulder, and that film will come out here soon. Like that was all filmed with Tethered, and they've put out a couple films of that whole hunt. And I think the next one you'll see that, where it's like, not until we went back and looked at the footage was there a small branch that was there that like I couldn't see when I drew back to shoot, in the shadows and bullshit and clip that branch. But when you slow mo it and go back, Zach was looking at it, he's like, when you slow mo it, I can see the branch, your arrow passes, the branch is gone.
Yep.
And that was all it took. And it makes you sick, man. It's like, and I kind of kicked myself because I had one more day to hunt that. If I want, or not, I shouldn't say one more day. I had basically the next morning to hunt that, but I was just kind of down in the dumps, from hitting that deer and wounding it and not finding it. And of course I walked through everything that I had scouted and blew everything up. You know what I mean? To where I was like walking back in there. It's like, if there was anything in there, we've kicked it out while we were grid searching everything. So it
Yeah.
was kind of
Well,
pointless.
and that's exactly where I was at when I was grid searching for my buck. Believe me, I mean, the thought went through my head. I went, man, if I spend a couple of days grid searching and I don't find him, my season's over.
Yeah.
Because I'm completely smoking this thing. But it was the only option I had. I had to do my due diligence and look for that deer.
Yeah.
And I did not have a single buck or doe come through my property for 10 days.
Wow. That's crazy, man.
Yep. I mean, just smoked it. Well, like I said, and that just was evident of what I already knew about. You have to hunt that property so cautiously, and scent free.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's been a season in this series, kind of for both of us, of missed opportunities. Chad and I were lamenting this as well, because he kind of had the same thing. Like, he missed one in Missouri, shot right under it. Was at full draw on it, I think, at a second time, same deer. I came back to PA and had one of the 3 deer that I was trying to kill. The one I lost track of like early in the season, like late September. He disappeared and I never saw him again. So there was really 2 that I was trying to kill, and one of the 2, well, there was 3 really, but 2 of them were really the ones that I was prioritizing, I guess. And the one actually came through like the first week that I was back from my trip. I went out and hunted, and 7:00 in the morning, he walks through on a zombie walk, not chasing a doe, as slow as you could possibly want him. And I screwed that up because I just didn't grab my bow in time, and I waited too long. Like, I don't know. Like, let me ask you this, man. Do you ever get lazy? And lazy is not the right word. Maybe it's too confident, right? Because I felt like I was overconfident, which is why I didn't pick my bow up. Because I heard what I thought was a deer. I convinced myself it was a squirrel, but then I heard it again. I was like, nah, it's got to be a deer. And I'm watching it, and I saw a deer. I didn't pick up my bow because there was a forky and a doe that were kind of visiting this scrape pretty often, right? And I was like, I convinced myself it was probably one of those 2. So I didn't pick up my bow. I was like, oh, that's one of those 2 deer. But I couldn't see his head yet, and then all of a sudden I saw tines, and I was like, oh, that's probably that forky. Still didn't pick up my bow. And then all of a sudden his head popped through the brush, and it was like, oh shit, that's one of the shooters. And by that time I picked up my bow, and once he crossed that brush, there was nothing between he and I any longer. Like, there was like, he had full visibility of me, and he was at 14 yards, but I couldn't turn to shoot. And it was my own, I guess my question to you is like, have you ever been like overly confident of what you're hearing or what you think you're going to see, that you've made the mistake of not taking action quick enough and then screwed your opportunity?
Totally. Yeah. No. There's been times where like I almost have to tell myself, I'm like, pick your friggin' bow up, like get ready just in case,
Right.
And I think there's some complacency that goes on sometimes. I'm guilty of it too. Yeah. Sometimes I have to kind of tell myself. I'll tell you one thing that I don't know if this had anything to do with this season or not, but something I used to always do back in the day is I would shoot a doe or 2 really early in the season. Get the rust out of the way. Just going through the motions of grabbing your bow, getting in position, ranging, drawing, shooting. I mean, we've all done it a bunch, right? But it's different in a tree than it's when you're in your backyard. The last time, so I shot my antelope on August 29th. And then the next time I drew back on a deer was in Kansas. And then the next time was November 12th. So
Right.
I think there's something to be said about going that long with drawing your bow back on an animal. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So next year, come October, I'm telling you right now, I'm going to go to a tree stand set where I don't think that I would see my buck,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to shoot the first doe that comes out.
Yeah. I,
Just,
I
you
I
know.
I agree with you, man. It's I thought the same thing. Or I say this every year. I'm like, I'm going to shoot does at the beginning of the year just so I can get a couple rips.
Mhm.
And every year I see does, and then I let them walk. You know what I
I know.
mean? Like,
Yep. Well, you tell yourself, and I did it this year. I'm like, man, I should probably shoot that doe. I'm like, man, it's kind of warm, and Mama already texted me and told me she had dinner ready, and I don't really want to mess with field dressing a doe tonight, and you know what I mean?
right? Yeah, yeah. You come up with all the reasons why you shouldn't shoot that deer. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Nah, I've been there. I've been there too. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Look, I'm not a perfect person, and a buck, I'll kill it wherever. You know what I mean? And drag it out or whatever. But there was one spot in particular, like a doe came through and bedded down like
Mm-hmm.
15 yards from me and bedded there for like 30 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I should shoot this deer. And then be lying if I didn't, part of me didn't want to shoot her because it was an area where I knew that there was a bed and I had a lot of buck activity on that camera, at all hours of daylight, like leading into the season. And still, even like after the season, there was a mock scrape that was there. They were hitting the scrape. And so there was a couple good deer that were using it in general. And I didn't want to screw that up by shooting a doe, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, kind of blowing up the spot or whatever. So that was part of it. And then I'd be lying if I didn't say that the other part of it was I was like, man, I'm 2 miles back in here. And I really don't want to be having to drag a doe out 2 miles. Like, I'm not going to lie. Like, that totally crossed my mind, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was partially why I ended up not. It was those two things is why I didn't like take the rip. And then now looking back on it in hindsight, it's like, man, I probably paid for that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, it was probably my penance was like, screwing that opportunity up on that deer that I just didn't pick my bow up.
Right.
So, man, I'm curious though, man, because you said you changed. Whenever you were hunting Tyson, you hit him right, and you said you had decided to kind of change broadheads or whatever, and for that particular hunt, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I've done some mid-season gear changes as well. Like this year, it's like I went out. Well, I shouldn't say mid-season, but like as the season was starting, like the week of, like I changed my bow because I was fed up with the bow that I had, and I was having a hard time getting it tuned, and it wouldn't tune. Come to find out, I actually talked to some folks where that was actually a common thing with that specific bow. Like it had a very specific kind of not ailment, a very specific thing that was kind of, I don't want to say wrong with them. Maybe it's a design flaw. Maybe is one way to say it. That might be a
Mm-hmm.
way. Might be a way to
Mm-hmm.
put it. That the same people were having the same issue getting it to tune as I was having. Um, I got tired of fooling with it. I went out and bought a Matthews and was like, screw it, buying a Matthews, got it set up. It shoots darts. I love it. Right. So mid-season gear changes happens to me every so often. Also during the course of the year, there's things I start the year with in my pack that I end up
Mm-hmm.
throwing out because I'm like, I just don't ever use this thing. You know
Yep.
what I mean? I,
Yep.
I have the intention of using it or I think I'm going to need it. And I get like a month into the season and it's like all of a sudden, like my pack goes from like having all this stuff to like, I don't even wear clothes in anymore. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like I'm just tired of carrying whatever it is. So I'm curious, man, like, what gear do you typically change? What gear are you willing to change? What gear did you potentially change this year? Like what's the deal with that?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm like you. Once you get set and dialed in, I hate making changes in the middle of the season. Um, 2016, I changed bows on November 12th.
Wow.
Crazy.
Well, and
And
what was it? 2 years ago, you had the crazy change your sight and all that stuff because your bow dropped out of your tree before you shot that buck in the snow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. At least I went back with the same brands and the
True.
same models and that kind of stuff. But yeah, that can play crazy on a guy. But I had a bow in 2016 that I was fighting the timing and fighting cam lean on it left and right. And I come from some manufacturing experience, so I get it. Sometimes you just have a bad one.
Yeah.
Um, but I made a change on November 12th to a bow that I had shot 11 months prior at an ATA show, and it felt good to me. And I'm like, screw it, I'm going to make a change. I'm going to try this out. I let it rip a few times, knew that it was probably not something I wanted to shoot 80, 90 yards right out of the gate, but I made a 32-yard shot, and it was, and I, shot a public land Iowa buck, that night,
Right.
the same day I set it up.
Nice.
And that's when I started my relationship with Prime. And I don't know. I think Prime makes a really high quality bow. Um, and it's a very accurate bow. It's a very consistent bow. But I've always thought it was a noisy bow.
Right. That was my biggest complaint, man, because I've shot, a bunch of. So when I first shot, whatever it was, not first shot, but like 5 years ago or something like that. Like I was going through like buying a bow, right? And I
Yep.
was like, I'm
Yep.
gonna go. It was the first time I was ever actually going to go just shoot every high end bow that there was, right?
Yep.
Before I purchased the bow. A lot of times I was purchasing off of like friend recommendation or whatever. Like so and so likes this bow. I trust their opinion. I'm gonna shoot that bow. Um, and so I went out and shot all of them and shot the Prime, and that was like one of my biggest take. There was a handful of things I didn't like about certain bows. Primes, I felt like it was noisy. I personally wasn't a big fan of the back wall with those. Hoyt had way too much hand shock, and I didn't like the draw cycle. I shot elites and they were nice, but I just almost felt like they were very similar to Prime. They were quieter, but it was like I still felt like I had some hand shock in that I didn't like. And then at that time was the Matthews Halon, and I ended up shooting that one, and that thing was like dead in hand. I mean, it weighs like a boat anchor. It was heavy, but that was also
Right.
why it was kind of quiet. Right, it was a heavier bow,
Yeah.
so it was a little quieter, no hand shock, and so I ended up shooting that. And I've said since I've gotten this new Matthews, it's like I should have never changed. Like I just shoot Matthews well. Like doesn't I don't know what it is. I can pick up a Matthews and shoot it. Other brands, it's like I have to learn how to shoot it.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, totally. Um, yeah, I'm the same way. And so about 2 months ago, I was at my local bow shop and just goofing off, nothing for nothing. Had some downtime one day. It was one of those days where it was like 90 degrees outside or whatever,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
35-mile-an-hour wind gusts. So I'm
yeah.
like, if there was a day to screw off and not go to the tree, this is the day.
Right.
And a guy was in there getting a new Bowtech set up, and um, he's like, I was checking it out. I'm like, it looks pretty cool. And he goes, man, these bows are so awesome and easy to paper tune and blah, blah, blah. So I said, well, heck, let me shoot one. So he grabs me a bow, and I drew it back and shot it. I thought it felt really, really nice to me. Felt really
Nice.
good. And I thought, man, that was a really smooth draw cycle, and that was a really smooth release. So I shot another one and another one, and I'm like, wow, I'm very impressed. I'm like,
Mhm.
good job, Bowtech. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, damn nice piece. Didn't give it another thought. Um, then I go to Kansas, and I have this deer duck this arrow, and
Right.
I'm like, I wonder if that deer heard the bow. And sometimes, man, it seems like in hunting or bow hunting, especially, stuff gets in your head,
Yeah.
and you start thinking about it and obsessing about it, and then it kind of consumes you a little bit. And I said, you know what? Maybe it's time to make a change, when it comes to my bow, and just switch stuff up.
Man.
And and I can honestly say that Bowtech Revolt feels better to me than my current Prime Black Series bow.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, man, is like confidence is like everything with your bow. Like I,
A
I,
100%.
I can hunt, I can hunt using, like I hunt out of a saddle, right? But I could jump into a tree stand and hunt and feel okay. You know what I mean? Like I don't prefer it, but I can do it, right? And it wouldn't feel awkward to me necessarily, right? Or I would have confidence that if it was in the right tree in the right spot, that I could kill a deer out of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Same thing with like whatever it is. You know what I mean? Boots. It's like, yeah, I'd like to get a new pair of boots. Just put it that way, right? But like the ones I have, they leak sometimes or whatever. But it's like I can tolerate them. You know what I mean? It's like I've tolerated leaky boots in the past. I'll be fine. You know what I mean? But as soon as my bow, whenever I started struggling to tune it, and I started struggling with it, the problem with it wasn't losing confidence in the bow. It was that I started losing confidence in myself because whenever I was shooting and I would shoot poorly or I couldn't get the arrow to land where I wanted it, I was
Mm-hmm.
having a hard time dialing it in because now I was questioning, was it me or is my bow kind of jacked up? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And I couldn't tell which was which. And so, and look, part of it was me. I'm not a perfect shot, and part of it was me probably outthinking myself a little bit too, but I ended up picking up that Matthews and I had it dialed in. I had the arrow, landing where I wanted it to land in 3 arrows. And then I started flinging arrows out to 60 yards and was putting them where I wanted them. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I was like, and in my backyard with my previous bow, it's like I was having a hard time grouping shots at 30 yards. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And it was just, and it's confidence is everything when it comes to your setup, 100%. You know what I mean? It's like, and a lot of time it's you, but you have to know that the bow is doing its job to know that if it is you, that you need to fix your mechanics or whatever. You can't have a question, right?
Yep. 100%. Yeah. I mean, having confidence in your equipment, and I mean, it's no different. Like when I was driving race cars, if I was confident in my car and felt like I had a good setup on my car, I could drive that car harder. If I wasn't real, if I went to a new track and we were on a new shock spring combination, I'm like, man, the very first time I pitched this thing into turn one, I don't know if it's actually going to turn left or not. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Um, and those cars are the way the way, a little side note here on dirt car suspension. Um, to get the most effectiveness out of the suspension, you have to be on the car and work in the car.
Right.
If you're starting to get too close to the wall and you would think, all right, well, I better let off the throttle. And if you do that in a dirt car, like you're going to get sucked into the wall.
Right.
Like being on the gas is what is making the suspension work, and that's what's holding you on the damn racetrack.
Right.
But found that out the hard way, my second race ever.
Right.
But so anyways, yeah, I mean, having confidence in your equipment's huge. And like I said, I'm like, man, maybe it's time to make a change. And and hey, and I've also always said too, it's product first, it's people first, product second, but they both have to be fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And I will rock a product that's number 2 or number 3 in that category as long as the people are awesome.
Mm-hmm.
That's just me. I like working with the people and having that relationship that you can call the people and say, hey, this is what I got going on. What's up with that? How can I change this? Or,
Right.
what's a way? So I like having those personal relationships, with those brands. And I like working for, with and for good people. Right.
Yeah.
So if I feel like I'm starting to lose that relationship with a particular brand, then that's when you're going to see me make changes.
Yep.
I made a switch from Mystery Ranch to rocking some Sitka and Kafaru packs this year.
Right.
And you can read between the lines there.
Right.
I'm making a bow change this year.
Yep.
You can kind of read between the lines there. So again, I think Prime, they always have and they always will make a great product. I just felt like it was time for me to make a change, something that felt better to me, that I had more confidence in and whatnot. And like I said, I was looking for a little bit quieter bow.
Yep. 100%. So are you gonna do the full, like go out and do the full test, like and shoot a bunch of bows? And awesome.
I am. Yeah, I am. I will tell you that, and I can say this now because I know that the podcast will air, a week to 2 to 3 weeks from now.
Right.
I I did go ahead and buy a Bowtech.
Nice.
Yeah, I went ahead and ordered one. It should be here in another day or so.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's what I'll be using for late season.
That's awesome.
And but again, I still want to get out and put my hands on the new V3.
Mm-hmm.
I still want to shoot that Elite Encore
Yep.
as well.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, there's a couple of bows that I still want to put my hands on and give them a rip. But as of right now, between um, the PSE and the Prime and the Bowtech is ahead by light years.
Nice. That's awesome, man. Yeah, dude. It's always about being comfortable with your gear, man. Like it's
Yep.
like there's no substitute for that.
Yeah.
It's like
And even though it's different, have confidence to me is more important than familiarity. Like having a familiar bow in your hand that you don't maybe have confidence in. I mean, dude, I would be curious to ask, your listeners, that are avid compound bow hunters, that 30 to 40 yard window can be tricky,
mm-hmm.
as far as deer being on keyed up on alert and dropping and ducking.
Right.
Especially when they're keyed up and they're like, you got to stop them,
Right.
Actually, I had a buddy of mine here tonight. He texted me. He's like, dude, I just had a doe 36, 37 yards drop so low. I shot her in the friggin' back straps.
Jeez.
Like didn't spine her, shot her in the front of the back strap, basically no man's land,
Right.
and he's like, what the heck?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah, dude, it's that between, that 35 to 40 yard window. It's a scary place to be, man, as far as those deer dropping.
Yeah, it's funny, man. I just did my buddy Wilson. He and I just did a podcast came out right before this one. And he does a lot of bow work now. He works at a local bow shop around here, so he's shooting like every bow, setting them up and stuff like that. So I talked to him a good bit about it because he's got some good insight. And we started talking about. People are probably tired of hearing me say it, but my buddy Brian Broderick from Day 6 Gear was on however many months ago it was, and he kind of talked about his optimum whitetail setup, exactly what you're talking about, right? And
Yep.
what his theory is I'll make this quick because people have heard this before. He removes all moving parts. He shoots a whisker biscuit. He's like, it doesn't move. It works. Like, and actually Wilson and I were talking about it, and he's like, you lose 2 feet per second from it. Like they did the test with a chrono and like tested arrows and different bows, and you legit lose like 2 feet per second using a whisker biscuit versus a drop away. So the speed loss isn't that much. And it'll never move. It's not going to, well, I shouldn't say it'll never move, but it's not going to break, right? Like you're not going to all of a sudden have a mechanical failure and miss a deer because you had a mechanical failure or whatever. And so he does that and takes a moving part out of it. And then what he does, and it's the same thing I did and it helped me, is he goes to 30 yards. Brian does this, and this is what he kind of recommends for his optimum whitetail setup. Go to 30 yards, shoot your single pin until when you're holding, just say you're holding on an X, right? For an example, and that your arrow is now landing 3 inches below the X at 30 yards. He's like, because a whitetail's kill zone is like 6 inches, right? He's like, so now at 30 yards, you're 3 inches low if you hold on the heart, right? Well, at 30 yards, he's like, most eastern whitetails, that have pressure are going to drop somewhat. He's like, so if you hold right there and they drop, you should be in the top of the lungs and good to go. He's like, and if they're closer and you're holding on the heart and you're in a tree and you're at an angle, he's like, you need to hold high anyway. So when you land high, you actually are going to land where you need to land. He's like, and what it has done is it takes all the guesswork out. He's like, you don't hover, you don't hold off, you don't hold low, you don't hold high. You hold exactly where you want that arrow to go and let physics make the correct shot or make the correct placement.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, so you don't, you hold one place. That's it. Whatever it is, however you shot your bow in, that's where you hold when you're shooting, no matter if you're at 3 yards or 30 yards, and it'll account for either drop or angle whenever they're closer.
Yeah. Makes sense. I see what you're saying.
But well, cool, man. That was a pretty good catch up sesh, man. We had a lot of stuff to catch up on. Before I let you go though, let folks out there know where they can follow you. I know they know a lot, the people who listen to this know who the hell you are, but just in case we have any newbies out there, let them know where they can follow Johnny Utah and all his shenanigans.
For sure. The most up-to-date, current, almost play-by-play would be my Instagram, johnny.utah.hunt. I'm really religious with my IG stories and stuff like that. And you'll also get to see a lot of my photo content. Arrow Wild TV is my web show, and that's going to be like gear reviews and the feature episodes of my hunts, whether it be shed hunting, elk, antelope, turkeys, whatever. You can view that on either Carbon TV, which is a free platform. If you're not familiar with Carbon TV, it's like the Netflix of hunting. So there's Arrow Wild TV on Carbon TV or the YouTube channel. And if you do go to YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. It allows me to keep doing what I do. I don't want to have another day job. I like this day job, even though I live off of ramen noodles. It's better than going to a cubicle every day. So help me stay employed, so to speak.
The unemployed employed. That's awesome. Well, dude, I love catching up with you, brother. We need to make sure to do this more often now that hopefully things are calming down a little bit. We'll talk beforehand, but happy holidays to you. Have a good Christmas.
Sir. Yeah, same to you. Same to all the listeners, man. Hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. This year's Thanksgiving for me had a little more meaning. Was spending time with family and what you're thankful for. Kiss those loved ones because tomorrow's not guaranteed for anybody.
That's right, man. And on that note, we're going to go ahead and get on out of here. Thanks all for listening. All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there as well. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tethered, Exodus Outdoor Gear, Skull Brew Coffee Company, and Maven Optics. And until next time, we'll see y'all.